Hey friends, welcome to Aromatic Chat, the podcast that introduces you to registered, clinical, and certified aromatherapists around the world. Every other week, I sit down with an amazing human who happens to practice aromatherapy to learn about their aromatic journey and how they use essential oils in their lives and their businesses. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching, personalized one-on-one transformational coaching. If you or someone you know feels like you're being buried alive by the stress and overwhelm in your life, you'll want to reach out to Lemon Balm Coaching for your free discovery session. Transformational coaching for the business of life. I'm your host, Melissa, your holistic transformational coach and registered aromatherapist. I want to thank Catherine Wild of the Soul Care Mom podcast for this excellent review. She titled it Soulful and Informative. She says she loves the beautiful energy that I bring to each episode and that the podcast is full of amazing information. I am learning so much. Wow. Thank you, Catherine. Would you be open to taking just 1 minute to leave a review on Apple Podcast? Not only does your review make it possible for other listeners to find Aromatic Chat, but I read every review. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Today is a behind-the-scenes look at what makes what I do with aromatherapy even possible. If it weren't for people like my guest, there wouldn't even be essential oils for us to use. Welcome to episode number 51, Aromatic Chat with Mark Dundore of Southeast Devils Club. I'm not even sure how to introduce Mark because what he's doing is honestly just too amazing to summarize. So let's get started. Good afternoon.
Well, good morning. Well, yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, I got kind of confused. Like, wait a minute, tomorrow is the 3rd. It's already
Tomorrow for me. Yes,
exactly.
It is. I still struggle so greatly with the time zones.
We have the same in Alaska. We're like 4 hours behind Eastern. So when I talk to somebody that's in France or something, like, I don't do that. I do a lot of math, but I mean, I
can't math where time is concerned for some reason. I cannot do it. I don't know what the disconnect is, but my brain just can't do it.
I found out a cool thing today. I sold some Devil's Club to a store, a local retail store, and they still had a bottle after 19 months. So I said, well, let's check the shelf life. So I sent that in for testing. I got the results back today. It's the same concentration of Neurolidol as it was originally. So it's at least a year and a half shelf life.
Wow.
They have another one, and I'm going to check that at 2 years. So in another 5 months, I'll go back there and get that one. I'll just trade them out, new one for old, and they're fine with that. So
I love that you're doing that and that you're checking. That's so important. So important.
Well, it changed the color. It was a little bit reddish. So, and I was like, well, let's see what has happened to it. The top 5 components were the same. They were just in a different order. So,
oh, wow.
There's 44 million acres in Southeast Alaska. About 10% of the acreage has Devil's Club on it.
Yeah. Is it considered a weed?
It's considered a nuisance plant in Juneau. I have people that will ask me to come to their yards and just clear all of it. I don't want to, 15 acres, just clear all of it down to the ground. Pull the roots out if you can. I may have cleared 3 acres in the last 2 years.
Wow. But that's free plant matter for you, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, I'll come clear your Devil's Club.
That's fine. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, Mark, I just want to thank you for agreeing to come on for a full-length episode of Aromatic Chat to share what you're doing up in Alaska with this nuisance plant.
For the Tlinkits, it's a very culturally important plant. But for the city and the state, when they have to clear trails and they have to clear roads, and it's a nuisance. So there's really two at the same time. We have to kind of be really sensitive about it. Now the native land, if I get permission from the secretary of the tribe, I can go there because I'm being adopted into one of the tribes. thousands of acres I have available already. So
what I would love for you to do, this is an opportunity for you to share basically your story, because I feel like stories are what matter. People connect through the story of what's
right.
happening, not just I'm selling this essential oil, but like why. So we would love to hear like what in the world led you to distilling Devil's Club.
About 4 years ago, I had it seemed like bronchitis. There was some chest and lung congestion, and I was told by quite a few of the native folks that the Devil's Club has a lot of medicine in it. You should try some of that. Well, I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know anything, so I just went and cut down a piece of it, stuck it on my dashboard, and drove back and forth to work. The fumes were in the car, and after about 4 days, it cleared up, and I didn't have any trouble. I said, well, that's amazing. So my wife wanted to try some tea. So I scraped some of it down and made some tea out of it, and it helped her blood sugar, lower the blood sugar. I said, well, that's two things it can do. What else can it do? And how do we know what about it is good? What makes it good? And so I looked online to find out what was in it. What was the chemistry? And so I finally found a guy in British Columbia who has botanicals, and he has been making Devil's Club essential oil from the roots for 20 years, and he sells it. So I contacted him and I said, how do we use it? What is it used for? And he says, well, I make it and I sell it. I can't tell you how to use it. I don't know. I'm not, any of the medicine. If you want to buy some, buy it. I said, well, who knows how to use it? He said, well, you contacted an aromatherapist and they'll tell you. So then I went to AIA and I asked them, all of the aromatherapists I could get in contact with, tell me about how to use Devil's Club essential oil, because there's some here. Here's the GCMS, here's what it is. And they said, we don't know. I said, okay, well, there's Devil's Club here. If I can make it the same way that Herbert makes it, then I can send it in for testing and see if these plants are the same as his plants. And so I built a chemistry lab, and I had to figure out all the glassware and all the steam process and the distillation. And I use only glass. I don't use any copper or anything, because I don't want anything to interact with the oil, because you don't know all the components in it, what it's going to do. So you stick with glass. It took me about a year to figure that out. I ended up making the essential oil, enough of it to get tested, and sent it in to Dr. Pappas, and he tested it for me a couple of times. It's pretty difficult to try to process the plant. You have to go out in the woods, in the marsh, on the hills, and it's just, if you've seen the plant, you'll see all the spines. You really have to have a lot of protectant gear on to even go and get it. But it takes about 1 kilogram to make around 6 milliliters of the oil. The native people have been using it for hundreds of years, like maybe 1,000 years. And so they have all of the history behind what it can do, anti-inflammatory and viral, and all of the thing properties. So I said, well, let's see what in the oil will do these things. So then I did the research of Nerolidol, which is the primary, and then each of the top 20, I accumulated that information and summarized it. And then now I know what categories they're mostly good for. And that's just kind of what I did.
Wow. So are you a chemist by trade?
No, I took a couple semesters of college chemistry. In the research, I did hundreds of hours of research, and then I wrote a paper for AIA in the summer last year. It was published for that. 12 of the 25 pages were published, but Dr. Bowles helped me a lot with the editing, and she was contributing editor for that. One of the things that's really important for me is sustainable harvesting. Even though there's tens of thousands of acres here, it's still important to not kill the plants. I do regular field study checkups on particular plants and particular methods of harvesting. And then I have pictures, and there's a article going to be published in the spring for AIA for sustainable harvesting.
So I'm so curious, because you weren't a chemist, you took a couple chemistry classes. What do you do?
Oh, I'm an IT guy. I've been doing network engineering and 20 years of IT stuff.
network engineer, but you had a chest cold, you used this devil's club and it turned you on to what can this plant do? I'm curious to know what was the catalyst to really stick with it, because you said it took a year to figure out how to distill it.
Right.
What in the world was the catalyst or the reason that you were able to stick to it? Because someone who's just, oh, I'm a little bit interested, probably wouldn't have stuck to it, but yet here you are.
The more I made of it, and the more I had some of my friends try it, like I had a lady that she was an elderly lady, and the cuts would take 2 weeks to heal on her hand. And when she tried a little bit of 1% in olive oil, and the next cut healed up in 3 days. So when you're talking about quality of life for people, I mean, you're really improving the quality of life, whether it's a burn or a bruise or a stabbing pain or whatever, and they can't sleep. When you improve the quality of life that drives you, this can help more people. Let's see how it can help and to what degree. And, does it need to be 1%? Does it need to be 3%? All of the research has been done. We're waiting for clinical trials. We need clinical trials. Like probably 20 or 30 of those studies said, this concludes this. We need clinical trials. And so, well, what is it going to take to have clinical trials? At some point, peppermint, lavender, every essential oil was unknown, but it became a acceptable essential oil and commonly used now. But it had to go through steps to do that. So I went to the educators and I asked them, what is it, the criteria that you need to have the oil generally accepted? So they told me what they were looking for. And so then I wrote that into the paper that I did. That was my goal, is let's see if it can be made acceptable, if there's any impurities, toxicology. I've done all the toxicology studies, and it's been days laboring over it. My wife's like, it's good. It's good. Just stop researching that. So
you wanted to be thorough. I get that.
It has to be safe. It has to be safe, 100%.
Yeah. Do you see the possibility of the native community accepting the essential oil, not necessarily in place of the plant, but in addition to actually using the plant?
I work at a native corporation, so I work with a lot of people, and many of my customers are natives that work with me. I mean, they're some of my best customers.
Okay. How much do you typically produce in a year? Well, I guess this is a multi-part question. Is Devil's Club grown year round? Is it a perennial? Is it an annual? How much do you personally produce per year? And then do you see it expanding out to like a mass production once you've got all the testing in place? So multi-part question. So tell us about the plant. Tell us about the plant.
It grows in marshy areas that has slow moving water and some drainage. It's mostly in the wooded areas. I mean, it's in old growth forests, a lot of it, and by streams. So it's almost impossible to get any kind of commercial equipment. You've got to take your tote and your loppers, haul it out there, cut it, and then bring the tote back. There's really no commercial harvesting method of doing it. As far as how much I make, so it grows during the spring and summer, and then it puts it out its berries, and then it goes to seed in the autumn. So it's a rhizome, so it'll spread out from a central root. So one of the things I've done as far as the field studies is that there's a lot of native use of the plant. They make it into diffused oil, and they make it into tea, and they make it into tincture, and there's some ideas that they have about how to get the best potency. So one of the things I set out to do with my field study was to verify. When they said it needs to be by a stream, I would cut it by the streams and send it in for testing. And that's the reason I started with the essential oil, because you can quantitatively test the essential oil. I mean, you can send that in regularly, make it the same way, and you can test and see how strong or relatively strong it is. So I would test, against the stream or the ocean, in the forests, rocky terrain. There's really no difference. However, in the growing season, you will get 10% more of the neurolidol than in the off season. So I came up with a way of stimulating it in my garage to go back to the growing season. So I can have that method. So I can harvest year round and get the full potency.
Do you mind if we go back to the harvesting real quick?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
There are other essential oil bearing plants that actually do have to be wild crafted, which is what you're talking about. You're talking about a wild crafted oil.
Yes.
This isn't something that, is grown on a farm. You have to go out, like you said, with your waders and your loppers and your bag and wild craft to get the best potency for this essential oil. Some of the other ones that I can think of, another big one that's wild crafted is helichrysum, which is Immortelle, Helichrysum italicum. And that's harvested way up in the mountains. So you have these people from these little villages climbing these mountains to wild harvest this plant, which is why it's so expensive, because wild harvesting requires, just by its nature, a lot more work.
And in the wintertime, you're having to go through 3 or 4 feet of snow and then try to find the bud that's a foot from the ground, and climbing over logs, and it's hazardous.
Yeah. So do you do all the wild harvesting yourself, or do you have a team? Oh, it's just you.
Well, I do have a helper. One of my sons is interested, so we go out and we cut a tote.
Wild crafting takes more effort, which is why these particular essential oils are more expensive. How would you rate Devil's Club in the cost?
I've done a lot of cost analysis. How much does it, how much is the fuel? How far do I have to go? How long does it take? All of that. How long does it take to prep? I have pretty detailed logs of all of that. So it's about $25 a milliliter, but you only need a single drop for chronic pain. So, I mean, it goes a long time. Most of my customers, they come back after about 2 or 3 months, 4 months to get another bottle.
And do you sell it in 1 ml?
No,
bottles?
I sell it in 2, 4, and 5.
It is a more expensive essential oil if we're talking 25 per mil. So a 5 mil would be 125. So it is a little bit more expensive, but I don't think it's cost prohibitive. So
there are other ones that are like $200 a mil. I mean,
correct.
there are some. Yeah.
Like a bottle of rose is very cost prohibitive. So unless you are like totally in love with it, you're not going to buy it. That's amazing. Wild crafting, you only have one person helping you, and yet you're producing enough that you can actually sell it. I think that's beautiful. So my next question is, are you still working full-time in IT, or has Devil's Club become your job?
No, I do IT full-time.
So you're doing IT full-time, and so this is just your side hustle.
Right. Well, it's a pretty serious one. Yeah,
it is a serious one. Yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, it takes have an hour of prep, which I can do on my lunch, and then it's 4 hours of distilling. And as long as you keep the water the right temperature and check in on it, you don't just sit there and watch the distiller for 4 hours. I mean, like watching water boil, right? So
yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot of that. I mean, it can do 2 batches a day without much trouble.
Do you see this becoming not necessarily a replacement for IT, but when you're ready to retire from the job force, do you see Devil's Club becoming more important in your life?
Yes, absolutely. It's a resource that's here. It does amazing things for all types of conditions. It improves quality of life for people. It's sort of a pseudo retirement plan.
Well, but it's beautiful because you're getting the ground, you're laying the groundwork now. You're doing all the heavy lifting right now with the testing and the figuring things out. And while you still have another income so that you're not, scraping by. I think that's a great plan. I love it. Can you tell us a little bit about the scent of Devil's Club? Because if we're talking about aromatherapy, we're talking about scent. How would you describe the scent?
It's an earthy forest smell. And people, it's very interesting because a lot of the aromatherapists that I've sent samples to, they will have a different description, but it's an earthy smell. Peppermint is a really great, if you don't like the Devil's Club smell, use peppermint and it will kind of hide that. And it also is a kind of symbiotic with the pain.
Okay, so it's an earthy smell. From the name, to me, it's just the name makes it seem like it would be pungent.
Yeah, it's pretty pungent.
Okay. Where does the name come from?
Well, it's because of the spines. You have thousands and thousands of tiny little spines on it. It's completely covered with spines. The stems, the undersides of the leaves, every part of it except the root and the berries have spines. So that's just the custom name. Instead of saying Aplopanix horridus, they just
this is kind of a spiritual question, but why do you feel that the plant itself had to be protected? Because if it's got spines all over it, that's protection.
It's a delicate plant, believe it or not. If you step on it or bruise it, that part of the plant dies. It will grow around the damaged parts, but if a log falls on it or it touches another Devil's Club plant, wherever that intersection is, that part dies. Even when you're harvesting, you want to make sure that you don't step on another plant next door, because then you come back and then the whole branch is dead.
That's interesting. Because I have a theory that like the plants that, this is my theory, I can't prove it, but I feel like the plants that give us the most emotional support and spiritual support are the hardest
to get.
Mm-hmm. So would you feel that is appropriate?
I think so.
For Devil's Club also?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. There goes more knocks, check marks for my theory then. That's great.
It's a rainforest plant, and we hear about medicine from the Amazon, and we hear it from years. It's this plant from the Amazon, but it's really scarce. And well, this is a rainforest plant, and it has it has dozens of uses. So it's kind of like in the same league.
I'm curious to know how the natives have used it throughout history.
They of course take the spines off, but I don't have to take the spines off, which makes it easier to process because I just have a machine that I use to strip all of the bark off, and then I just put all of it with the spines in the distiller.
I was also curious about the actual distilling process. So yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
So the natives have used it for anti-inflammatories and emetic. They've used it for headaches. They use it to make poultices from it. They'll use, typically, if you hear someone say Devil's Club oil, like olive oil in a mason jar, they'll put strips in it and they'll simmer it overnight. Or they'll just put the strips in it and put it in their garage for 3 months. And then that's their oil. And so it's interesting because I'm the only one that's ever made this. I'm the only one in the world that makes the one from branch bark. So when they say, oh, yes, I've used Devil's Club oil, it's like, well, that's not the same as steam distilled essential oil. So it's a big difference there. But it's I've done the research up and down the West Coast, all the way in Canada and in Alaska, down in Oregon. They've used it for a variety of purposes over the last at least a couple hundred years.
I wasn't aware that it grew all the way down into Oregon. That's cool. Because Oregon's a rainforest, duh. Okay.
So, right. We went on a road trip from Washington down to California this last summer. So I wanted to find out how much Devil's Club was there. How big were the stands? How far apart were they? And what quality did they have? So I did a pretty thorough field study. But the farther you get south, the less there is. And so you would want to do sustainable harvesting if you were going to do Devil's Club in Oregon, because there just isn't that much. So it really becomes important to know how do you cut it so that it can grow back season after season and not kill the plant and still have enough for your products.
The distilling process itself. So this might be super interesting for people who've never really heard about distilling. How do you distill? Devil's Club.
I have a big boiling flask. It's 5 liters. And then I have another flask chromatography vessel. It has an opening at the bottom for the steam. And then I have the distiller apparatus that comes at the top. So you just load it up with the material and then it pushes steam through it. It condenses in the condenser. And then you have the hydrosol and then the oil on top of the hydrosol. So you drain the hydrosol out and then you have the oil and then you just package the oil.
That's great. So for those that don't know, there's different types of distilling. There's water distilling, there's steam distilling, and then there's the combination water and steam. And so Devil's Club is all steam.
Yes.
So as the water boils, creates steam, the steam does what to the plant?
There's little pods of oil in the plant. And when the steam goes through, it expands it and then it releases that into the air, to the steam. Mm-hmm. But you have to get it to the right temperature for it to release the oil. You have to have the steam at the right pressure to vessel with the material. If you have it too low a temperature, it can condense in the vessel and not make it up into the condenser later. Mm-hmm. Or if you have too much pressure, it'll just punch holes straight through material. And then you get very little yield. So it's a science about, how much steam, if you put too much water in there, or if you have the plant pieces too big or too small. If you have it too small, it compacts in there and then you have boiling in the bottom. So you're actually boiling and steaming at the top and adding more steam. It gets really complicated. It's a really science about how to do that.
So that full year that you were figuring out the apparatus, this is what you were figuring out, right? Like how much steam, what pressure. Oh my goodness. Wow, Mark. Wow. And this is a side thing. This isn't your business. Right. This is like just because you saw the benefit of the plant, saw what it could do and decided I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to bring this to the world because the world needs what I have. Wow. So I want that to be an encouragement to anyone listening. If you're passionate about it, do like Mark did, find a way.
Find a resource that's near you that you can get relatively easily and learn about it, learn about the plant, find out what makes the plant thrive. How do you get from the plant without taking too much from it? I used for my machine that I used because it takes 7 to 9 feet of stock to make 1 single milliliter. So when I'm doing 10 milliliters, and we're talking 100 feet. You can't sit there and scrape 100 feet of that, 200 feet a day. You cannot do that over several days. So I had to make a machine and figure out, now these branches are all twisty and they're curved and you can't it's not like a bamboo, you just stick it right through the machine. You've got to have something that can accommodate all different sizes and thicknesses and everything. So it took me another 6 months to figure that out. I made the thing from materials that were at the hardware store. So that's my encouragement. There's things around you. Figure out how to do something with the materials available. I mean, you're going to have to try and fail and keep trying and failing. Challenge the assumptions that are there. Do the science, do the research. If you have, some tenacity, you can make it happen.
So I'm very curious to know if you have come from a line of people who are innovators. I believe that there is genetic memory. What we consider I have a great organizational skill. I'm very, very good at organizing things and getting things going. My mother was the same way. Her mother was the same way. And I don't think it was taught. I believe it's a genetic memory. My husband comes from a long line of boat builders. So each generation, they're innovators and they figure these things out. So I'm curious to know if you come from a long line of just people who are get her done type personalities. I mean, instead of sitting there going, gee, I wonder if I can do it, you just did it.
Right. My father was he did a lot of mechanical work with generators and things. My other grandfather on the other side, he was auto mechanic and general mechanic. So that's in our family. It's like, look, the thing is broken. Well, how can we fix it? Go figure it out and make it happen. So
you do come from a long line of people who are just well,
Yeah.
let's make it happen. Let's figure it out and make it work. Oh, that's amazing. I just think that's awesome. We all, we all have our family of origin and the things that we think we can do. And then there's the things that genetically we just can do. And that's kind of where I hear you're coming from. It was just, let me go to the hardware store and see what I can find.
I would spend hours in the hardware store going up and down the aisle saying, I need something that is this big that can hold this thing up. Now, what can I use? And have to so
that's awesome, Mark. You must have, I'm just going to say, you must have an amazing wife to support you in your passion.
She is, and she helps with the processing some of the time. And she's like, you have two brains, the Devil's Club brain and then the regular brain. I'm always kind of thinking, okay, let's see, if I were to do this, now what would happen with that? And how do I, so, okay, back to the real world, and then just do the Devil's Club on the side.
Well, I can hear your passion.
She says she calls them my babies. Because we'll drive around and I was like, well, let's check and see how they're doing over here. Let's see what's going on over here. And they're like, your babies, you got to go see them.
So this is just a 4-year journey that you've been on so far. Before somebody told you about Devil's Club for your upper respiratory issues, were you even aware that it existed?
Not really. I mean, they have it this is really a big tourist town. They have the salve in the stores and they have the oil. And so I knew it existed, but I was traditionally from a family that is only pharmaceutical, not in the pharmacy. From the pharmacy, it's not to be trusted. Over a period of time, obviously, I've changed my position dramatically. You have systems in the body that are affected by chemicals and compounds, whether those come from nature or they come from the pharmacy, they still will do the job. And if you get them from nature, like they've been doing for thousands of years, you can have better results and less, less interactions, drug interactions, and all of that.
I am sure that people who are hearing your journey of just 4 years to get to this place are probably sitting there going, wow, that's really cool. Wow. Mark is quite inspiring. His story is so inspiring, but who inspires you?
Originally, it's been my dad. It really inspired me from the beginning. So if you work hard and you make good choices, you can accomplish goals. How important it is to help other people. I mean, we're not here just to accumulate things. We're here to help other people. And everyone has times when they're going to be tired or sick or whatever, and having compassion on people and helping them, that is a major goal. The other things that inspires me are a lot of my customers. For instance, I had one lady that had diagnosed melanoma. I gave her some essential oil and she put I told her, use it at 1%. That's why I always say, use it at 1%. If it's not too weak, then add another drop and then add another drop. She didn't listen. She started straight. She just did neat. One neat drop and it took the melanoma away. It's gone. So I said, that's inspiring. Her husband has melanoma on his face and they're documenting it. And I've done all of the research about the phospholipids and the membrane layers and all of that as far as why you don't want to use it neat. People do, but I still recommend multiple treatments every day. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it 1% 3 times a day, that's fine. Or 3%. Multiple times a day for many, many days. All of the scientific studies I've read, they have a 2-week trial. They have 2 weeks to figure out whether this is going to do such and such to the rat. Unless you have something that's killing you, you have a chance to treat it over time. So you can use a 3%, 5%, whatever, dilution, and then just do regular dilution and have gradual effects and treat the symptoms. But anyway, he's been using it as taking the cancer away.
Wow.
So when you have something that's been diagnosed by a physician and documented, and then that's helping, that's huge. And that drives me a lot, knowing that, someone that had arthritis that couldn't move their hand now has full motion in their hand with no pain after 3 weeks. I mean, I can't get past that. So that really drives me.
I remember your presentation. I read the article, but this This, I think, has been the most eye-opening for me, hearing your story, hearing what you're doing. But as we close out, I would love for you to just share anything that's on your heart, anything that you want everybody to know. I would love to just give the floor to you so that you can close us out.
I think it's important to keep learning and discovering. There's so much we don't know. A good example is they did a study on some liver cells. The Neurolidol does this to liver cells. At one point in time, I had a conclusion that if you took this amount in this way, we might be able to expect this result, even though it's on cells and not the actual person. And then they got a different piece of technology, and they, a couple of years later, they had different methods of testing, and they tested it and they said, well, no, it doesn't do that. And then there was a third study that said, we're going to take slices of the liver, the actual liver from human patients, and we're going to slice that, and we're going to test how that works instead of just the little cells that they did in the Petri dish. And it was dramatically different. It changed the entire way of looking at toxicity of the Neurolidol and the Devil's Club, the safety and the confidence of the safety that I have for it now is much different. So I would say, keep learning, keep discovering, make a hypothesis and challenge it. Every time I change anything with the processing, anything, I send it in for testing. The idea would be, oh yeah, it'll be fine. You can't assume that it's going to be fine. You have to send it in for testing, make sure that it's still safe and it's the same as it was.
Mark, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate what you're doing. I was curious, even from the very beginning, when I asked you, what was it that drove you to keep going? And you said, well, helping other people. But when I asked you who inspired you and you shared that information about your dad, I was like, that's what keeps you going. It's because it's not just, oh, I just want to help other people. That's like a deep part of who you are. I just think that's amazing. And what you're doing with Devil's Club is it's really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
I keep thinking that the majority of my guests are regular people just like you and me. We aren't famous, we aren't Hollywood elite, and yet we show up. I love that Mark is showing up in such an exceptional way in the aromatic community through distilling Devil's Club, this plant that is unique to where he lives. I'm so thankful that he's given us a behind-the-scenes look at distilling and the process he walked through to learn on his own how to do this very delicate technique. He talked about the natives infusing the plant into olive oil, but that is not the same as an essential oil. An essential oil is the distilled, sometimes expressed, product of the volatile components that are synthesized by various plant tissues of a single plant species. Volatile simply means that these constituents evaporate quickly into the air. Infused oils, on the other hand, are obtained by soaking plants in a carrier oil, creating a dilution of the non-volatile compounds. I know I keep saying it, and I probably overuse this word, but I really do love how Mark was inspired by his father to care for other people, and this is what drives him to care for these plants and process them in a careful and sustainable way. If you're interested in getting some of Mark's Devil's Club essential oil, you'll want to contact him at the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today as I chatted with Mark Dundore. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching. Not everyone is like Mark and has the ability to take a dream and make it a reality without support. Lemon Balm Coaching offers whole mind, body, and spirit transformational coaching. If you're struggling with your vision and how to bring it to the world, you'll want to connect with me, your holistic life coach and registered aromatherapist, on the web at lemonbalmcoaching.com. If you're a registered, clinical, or certified aromatherapist and would like to be featured on an episode of Aromatic Chat, I would love to connect with you, and there's a link in the show notes to get that conversation started. Be sure to subscribe to Aromatic Chat on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review on Apple Podcast. I will see you next time with our next episode. Until then, peace, love, and aromatics.